on behalf of the Equinor team, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening to learn about the Empire Wind Project and to share your thoughts with our team. So I'm Susan Lino. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Long Island. And to start us off, I would like to ask everyone to stand so we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So just a quick round of thank yous before we get going. I do want to thank everyone for their support in putting this meeting together. I thank the City of Long Beach, the team here at the library, Tara and Jakia. Thank you for all the time and work that you put into getting us set up here. And I'd like to thank Helen Dorado Alessi and Diana Penaranda from the Long Beach Latino Civic Association. Diana and Helen have taken time to translate this presentation and to be here this evening to provide interpretation for anyone who needs it. So if anyone does need interpretation services and has not seen Helen or Diana to get set up with the headset, please do so. Okay, one quick note, the emergency exits are here on the side and in the back. And we also have a first aid kit available at the registration table if anyone needs it. So we put a great program together tonight. First, we'll introduce the Equinor team that's joined us for this discussion. We have one of Long Island's greatest advocates for the environment here with us, Adrienne Esposito from Citizens Campaign for the Environment. She will share a bit about the transition to offshore wind. We'll explore a bit about offshore wind on Long Island. We'll have a project overview on the Empire Wind Project. Then we will take a look at the permitting process. I have some updates on various engagement efforts that we've been participating in across the city. And then, of course, we have time for a thoughtful discussion. I believe when you all arrived, you received an index card. I would like to ask that as we go through the presentation, nobody got index cards. I see heads shaking. Oh, you have one. So I'm going to ask my team to walk around and make sure everyone has an index card. As we go through the presentation, if you want to write down your questions, and if you'd like to share your contact information, when we open it up for the discussion, we're going to use those cards to lead that discussion. But I anticipate there's going to be a lot of questions, so if your contact info is on there, we can reach out to you after to provide the information. And then finally, after the presentation and the discussion, we have a great group of subject matter experts here who will be stationed around the room for an open house. So I encourage everyone to walk around and meet with our team and ask your questions one-on-one with them. Okay, so let's meet our team to start. We have a really great team, both from Equinor and from our external consultants and researchers here. They represent a wide range of expertise, including engagement, right-of-way, permitting, fisheries, supply chain, engineering, technical aspects of wind. So we'll meet them, and then, like I said, they are going to introduce themselves, their area of expertise, and they will note where they're going to be when we break for that open house. Also to note, Harrison and I will be available when we break to the open house. If you're not sure which subject matter expert would address your question, come and ask us and we'll direct you in the right place. So let's do our introductions. I guess we already met. I'm Susan Lino, Community Engagement Manager and native Long Islander. I've lived on Long Island my whole life and have worked serving communities, engagement efforts across Long Island throughout my career. I'll have Harrison.
Thanks, Susan. So hi, everybody. I'm Harrison Foyer. I'm the New York Director of Public Affairs for Equinor, and I am also a lifelong Long Islander, but want to introduce you to a robust group of subject matter experts we have, and we'll start with Sue Davis.
Thanks, Harrison. I'm Sue Davis. I'm with Equinor, and I'm the onshore permitting manager after the presentation, you'll be able to find me at the permitting station over in that direction in the room. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Harriet Green. I'm the operations manager for our projects here in the US, and you will find me on this side of the room hosting the local investment and workforce development poster.
Hi everyone, Carrie Ann Soto. I'm a community engagement coordinator here on this project. I'm also a lifelong Long Islander. You'll find me floating around the room during the open house. So if you want to come say hi, or if you have any questions, I'm here.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Kotz. I'm with Exponent. I'm an electrical engineer, and after the program you'll find me over on the technical aspects of the cable route.
Hello, I'm Steve Drew. I grew up sport fishing, been a commercial fisherman for several years, and worked with Equinor for the last 5 years in fisheries liaison.
Good evening. My name is David McSweeney. I am the senior counsel in-house for Equinor, responsible for supporting our offshore projects and permitting matters. If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Corbett with Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech supports Equinor on their construction operations plans and its various federal and state permitting efforts. So I'll be over by the permitting board as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniela Higman. I'm the commercial lead for Empire Wind 2, so specifically for the Long Beach area. And you will find me and my coworker in the lobby. I believe it's in that corner.
Hello everyone, my name is Sal Camone. I'm also part of the commercial team working on the right-of-way and the easements.
Good evening, I'm Darryl Oakley from Equinor. I'm a bird and bat specialist and native New Yorker. I'll be in the back corner.
Good evening, I'm Ben Hughes with Equinor. I'm an electrical engineer in our substation team, and I will be at the technical aspects poster in this corner.
Okay, so that's everyone. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight to be here for the community to answer any questions they might have. So to start, I do have a short video that shows the work that Equinor is doing around the globe and here in New York. I'm laughing because it's one of my favorite videos. And then after the video, we'll have Adrian Esposito come up to share a bit about the transition to offshore wind for Long Island.
What does repowering America mean? It means creating a just transition for workers and new careers in the energy industry of the future. It means investing in innovation and technology to once again spur manufacturing in the United States. And it means working with communities to ensure the full potential of this new energy source is met. The world needs climate solutions now, and Equinor is ready to lead the way. Our values shape how we engage with society and coexist with others. An international leader in energy, Equinor is building renewable and low-carbon energy solutions around the world. Our Empire Wind and Beacon Wind projects will power millions of homes with renewable energy produced off the northeastern shores of the United States. We don't have time to wait. Equinor is leading the way towards creating a renewable energy sector right here in America right now. Equinor, shaping the future of energy to get there together.
Okay, so I would like to invite Adrian to come up and share a bit about the transitioning to offshore wind.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adrian Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Our role here is we are actually an independent environmental organization that actually is a watchdog over the many environmental factors with siting offshore wind. And while we are an independent watchdog, we also do support continuing the development of offshore wind because, as it turns out, climate change is real, and also because it breaks our addiction to foreign fossil fuels. climate change is one of the most significant ways that we can do both of those things. Break our addiction to foreign fossil fuels and also fight climate change. So we believe it is in the Earth's best interest and the public's best interest to move ahead, but to do it with a site-specific and careful environmental review. As I said, shocking, climate change is not a hoax, as it turns out. It's not an international global hoax, but rather it's real. No one knows that better than the folks who live here in Long Beach. You've seen it firsthand. You don't need to hear it from me. But this chart just talks about global temperatures rising. Also, this chart is from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the government agency with the worst acronym. But this is the worst case scenario for flooding as time goes on with sea level rise. You can see the uncomfortable areas or the uncomfortable results for the blue and how that's going to impact coastal communities like both Island Park and also Long Beach and where I live as well. Okay, why are we doing this? Why are environmental groups around the state? Well, New York actually passed a law back in 2019 that requires New York to phase out fossil fuels and to reduce our carbon footprint. We have goals, which I'm not going to go over, but it does require us to transition to renewable energy. One of the requirements in that state legislation is 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind. How are we going to do that? Well, before we do that, I want you to know offshore wind is not new. Some people say to me all the time, well, it's a new technology. Is it going to work? It's not new. Europe, for instance, 28,000 megawatts of offshore wind. That equates to millions of homes. In addition to Europe, China, not known for their way ahead advanced environmental policies, also offshore wind, 27,000 megawatts. What do you think America has for offshore wind? Anybody want to guess before I give you the answer?
4.5 turbines off Block Island.
Block Island, yes, smarty pants over there, don't think. But yes, you're absolutely.
Which aren't running and are leaking oil.
5 turbines on Block Island. Okay. How many are running? All of them. So 28,000 megawatts in Europe, 27,000 megawatts in China. Here's America, bringing up the rear, 42 megawatts. So the point in telling you this is to illustrate that other nations got the memo and America is catching up. And here we are here in New York. It's not, somebody said to me a couple weeks ago, why don't they put them off of the coast with the big mansions, you know, in Southampton? And I said, actually, that's what they're doing. We have 5 projects right now that are going through the regulatory process. They're each at different stages. But the first one is that one all the way out east called the South Fork Wind Farm. That's connecting to the East Hampton substation, and that began construction at the beginning of this year and is due to actually go online either the end of next year or maybe January 2024, depending how things go. But it's in construction. Then, as you know, what we're here for today is Empire Wind 1 and 2, and then we have Sunrise Wind and Beacon Wind Farm. And these wind farms are going to connect either directly to Long Island, or one is going to go to Queens, and Empire Wind 1 is going to Brooklyn. So just wanted to give you a bigger picture of what's going on. And speaking of bigger pictures, the East Coast is also doing the same thing. It's not just New York, Long Island, and New York City. We have New Jersey, we have Delaware, we have Maryland, we have North Carolina, we have the Northeast region as well, Massachusetts. So this is something that is really here in America. It's being advanced. And I just wanted to give you context of what's happening here locally is part of a bigger picture, just so you know that. Thank you. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm not done. No, I'm done. You don't need to know that one. These are just, you know. Okay, thank you. Bye.
I can hit the back button, though. So hi, everyone. Again, I'm Harrison Foyer. Can everyone hear me? So I'm Harrison Foyer. I'm the New York Director of Public Affairs for Equinor. It's good to be back with the Long Beach community tonight. So we were with the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce 2 weeks ago. We were with the Village of Island Park last week. So we finished this version of the tour tonight with you again in Long Beach. So I want to keep it brief because tonight's the opportunity we want to make sure everyone gets to interact with our subject matter experts both in here and also after the event as part of the open house. So just broadly about Equinor as a whole, we're a broad energy company. That's oil and gas. That's also renewable energy. We're headquartered in Norway, but we've been in the United States since the 1980s. And just a few months back, we were so excited to open our first New York office, which is in Brooklyn. So around the world, we have 20,000 employees, and this map gives a good view of the scale of our commitment in the U.S. as well as our global ambitions. And I would add that in the U.S. on the West Coast, we were just awarded a lease area in California. So that's another addition that just happened yesterday. But let's talk New York, and we were global, now we're gonna go more local. So first and foremost, we recognize the opportunity that the offshore wind industry has to put more into the community than just power into the grid. And also, before I continue with the slides, I also want to acknowledge that we're joined tonight by legislator Denise Ford. So Legislator Ford, thank you for being with us tonight. So I want to continue. So in addition to being members of the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, our company values drive our community-based development model and inform our commitments for how we work with local communities. We put a priority on being open and collaborative, and we work knowing that how we deliver our projects is just as important as what we deliver. So we know that every step of the way we have to do it the right way. So let's talk specifically about our projects in New York, Empire Wind being the one that's more of focus in the city of Long Beach. And as Adrian mentioned, in 2019, New York State signed its Climate Act into law, which mandates that at least 70% of its electricity come from renewable energy by the year 2030. The state's goal for offshore wind in 2035 is 9 gigawatts. So our projects alone, meaning Empire Wind and Beacon Wind, are 3.3 gigawatts. So those alone make up over 1/3 of that goal. So those are the projects you could see right here in red: Empire Wind 1, Empire Wind 2, and Beacon Wind 1. The Empire Wind and Beacon Wind projects are a 50-50 joint venture between Equinor and BP, with Equinor as the operator, and altogether, these projects will power around 2 million homes once completed. So let's dive into some other numbers. So first, the U.S. electricity grid, and by that I mean power lines, substations, and supporting equipment, has not been systematically updated or modernized in the past 50 years. The grid, and particularly so in our region, is in need of investment to improve resiliency and reliability. And this is regardless of whether or not offshore wind is developed. Increasing volatile weather, so hotter weather, increase in summer demand, are stressing the system while at the same time making the system more vulnerable. It's a double whammy because climate change is leading to more extreme events, which impact the grid and ratepayers physically and economically. Storm cost recovery is then passed on to ratepayers. So in addition to updating the grid, older generation power plants are being replaced by cleaner resources. And these investments and this development all provide increased energy security. We saw that risk earlier this year from the volatility of the war in Ukraine and what it did to energy prices. Local production of electricity can help to mitigate perceived and real security risks, and it could also mitigate the cost and risk of importing electricity or fuels. The bottom line is that in the long run, reduction in these risks translates into more efficient and stable prices. So offshore wind isn't just a solution to this, but it's an opportunity to improve overall reliability and ultimately provide more local control and benefit to all of us here. Producing our own power for New York in New York provides more transparency and control over energy sources and costs. It allows us Long Islanders to meet our power needs locally while at the same time benefiting our local communities. So we look to the costs in the top left of this slide. These are costs for wind projects being built in the state of New York, and they're going to be shared by New Yorkers across the state of New York, not just the ones in this room and in these communities here. So were offshore wind not being developed, the costs would still increase, and potentially even by more, especially so in years where the price of energy faces global instability. So on the other hand, offshore wind has a multitude of positive benefits. The power from our projects is the equivalent of removing 1.3 million cars from the roads every year. It'll result in $2 billion in health benefits in the form of avoided hospitalization and premature death associated with asthma and respiratory illnesses. It will lead to thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic investment and economic development, as New York contractors will do a lot of the work to rebuild our grid. So doing nothing is not an option. Putting aside all of the positive benefits toward climate goals that Adrian mentioned, of which there are many, these are necessary investments. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Susan to get more into the specific of our project on the ground here and how it works.
All right. Oh, sorry, I forgot Harrison's so much taller than me. So thanks, Harrison. And as Harrison said, this is an opportunity for us to share about the project, but also for us to hear from you. So if anyone has their question cards filled out already, the team will be walking around and collecting them periodically. But I do want to remind you that if you have questions, jot them down. We'll get there. So how does offshore wind work? So the New York Bight, which is the area between New York and New Jersey, has some of the best offshore wind resources. That wind blows stronger and more consistently offshore than it does over land. It's close to populated areas, and offshore wind provides energy when we need it most. So wind blows the strongest during the peak times of the day, in the morning when we're all getting up, getting ready for work, and again in the evening when we're coming home, perhaps putting on the TV, turning on the news, cooking dinner. This diagram here illustrates how it all works, right? So starting with the offshore turbines, those capture those strong ocean winds and convert it to clean, zero emissions electricity, which is then carried through a series of cables to an offshore substation. And then it is carried further to the substation on land, where it ultimately is distributed into our grid. So Empire Wind, as we've been talking about, is an 80,000 acre lease area, approximately 15 to 30 miles off of the south shore of Long Island. It is being developed in two phases: Empire Wind 1, which is that triangle area, and that will connect into the grid in South Brooklyn. And then Empire Wind 2, which is the other area with the purple dots, and that will connect into the grid up by the Barrett's Power Station. The total project includes up to 147 turbines and 2 offshore substations. There will be up to 260 nautical miles of inter-array cable, which is the cable between the turbines, and then 66 nautical miles of submarine export cable, which is the cables that go from the farm to the land. So I feel many of you are probably asking what your view will be from the beach. So here we have a simulation of what you would see from the shore at Ocean Beach Park at Laurelton Boulevard. I want to remind you, visibility from the shore is dependent on the weather conditions and the time of day. But as you can see, maybe not so clearly here, but we do have this map outside when we go to the open house, and you can see it's a better image than projected here on the screen here. But the container ships that we all are familiar with are going to be in front of the turbine. Those container ships are roughly 3 to 5 nautical miles offshore. And as you recall from the last slide, the wind farm is 15 to 30 miles offshore. So they are quite a bit of a distance behind those container ships. We also have available a time-lapse video simulation of the view from various vantage points across the shorefront and throughout different times of the day. It is on the Empire Wind website in the virtual simulation hall. So I do encourage everyone to go check that out. And as I mentioned, this is on a map outside. Okay, so another question, how does that export cable get to the shore? So Equinor will be using a horizontal directional drill process, which will bury the cable up to 80 feet below the seabed. It starts at approximately 1,700 feet offshore, where the HDD exit will be, and then there'll be another jointing bay onshore at Riverside Boulevard in the street. The drill creates the path under the seabed, and then the cable is pulled through where it is then connected to the onshore cables. Once the cable is in the street, it does remain at about 6 to 8 feet below the ground, and that is where there are other existing utility lines. I do want to point out the photo here in the top right is another project of Equinor's, but I wanted to share it just so you get a sense of what the jointing bay looks like. But this picture shows it on a beach. For this project, it is not on the beach, it is in the street. All right, so for the cable route, we have highlighted here the preferred route, which is the one in blue. To select this route, we did do a thorough review of 5 potential sites, which included geological and marine surveys, as well as surveys of existing infrastructure, and we have incorporated feedback from the community in order to select this route. The onshore cables will run through Long Beach and Island Park to a point of interconnection up in Oceanside. All the cables will be buried underground, except for a small section when it crosses over Barnum's Channel. There will be one onshore substation that will be built in Island Park at the previous Pop's restaurant site, or former. So this preferred route that we have here does make landfall at Riverside Boulevard, where it will cross under the beach and boardwalk, again, around 80 feet below surface. And in order to cross that beach, Equinor is going to be working with the city through a formal legislative process. That local legislative process is known as a request for a municipal home rule, which will allow the city to request the New York State Legislature to enact legislation to allow Equinor the ability to access the landfall site and safely cross under the beach and boardwalk. So this, we also have a map. We have 2 maps outside, blown up much bigger so you can clearly see the cable route and the exact streets where it is. You could actually even see the houses along the route on the maps that are outside. So of course, we always anticipate that there's going to be many questions about the right-of-way and as well as construction as the plans move forward. Please know we are very early in the process, and we are continually engaging with the communities involved through community meetings like this, smaller focused community meetings based on feedback we hear at this evening's meeting, to continue to provide information on the questions you might have. Okay, so I want to take a few minutes and have another member of our team, our permitting team, come up and just share a bit about the permitting process. There's a federal and a state process, and there are ways to be involved in those processes. So I would like to ask Sue to come up and share a bit.
Thank you, Susan. So the overall permitting process is a long road before we can get to the point of construction and fabrication. Starts early on with studies that are still ongoing, and we have to go through both a rigorous federal and state permitting process to develop the most environmentally and socially responsible project. The project has to meet regulations such as the Coastal Zone Management Plan, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, Magnuson-Stevens Act that governs marine fisheries management. We also consult with state historic preservation offices and representatives of federally recognized Native American tribes. BOEM, or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, oversees the federal regulatory process, and the Public Service Commission oversees the state's Article 7 process. Like Susan mentioned, there are many opportunities for the public to get involved. For the state process, Article 7 was enacted in 1970, and it establishes a review process for any proposal to construct and operate major transmission infrastructure. It evaluates the purpose and need and environmental impacts of transmission infrastructure, and it allows the public to comment on the proposed project and plans. Empire 2 filed our Article 7 application in June of 2022, so earlier this year. And currently, the Public Service Commission is evaluating that application and will reach a determination of completeness once it's found that the application meets all the requirements in the Article 7 statutes and regulations. Once the application is deemed complete, the next step will be including public statement hearings on the application. Those are scheduled 60 to 90 days after the application is deemed complete, and the public is allowed to weigh in and provide comments and speak during the public statement hearings. And then once that takes place, additional review of the application process will begin. If anybody is interested in following the proceedings of the Article 7 process, you can subscribe to the service list on the DPS website, and the case number for the project is listed on this slide, as well as I think the website, yes, is on the slide as well. If anybody has any additional questions on how to do that process, please ask me after in the public open house timeframe. For the federal permitting process, BOEM issued a draft environmental impact statement that's out, available for public comment. It was issued on November 18th. I believe it goes 60 days, so into January. And there's multiple ways that the public can provide comments on the draft EIS. And we'll have a handout over in the permitting area that it can kind of go through the steps for how the public can provide comment. The DIS covers all aspects of the project and assesses the relative impact of the project to the environment. BOEM is expected to issue the final EIS in late 2023, with all federal permits expected by early 2024. Additional federal permits that the project needs includes the Marine Mammal Protection Act incidental take authorization, which comes from NOAA, the Outer Continental Shelf Air Permit or Clean Water Act from the EPA, and Section 10 Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 Clean Waters Act permits, which is the Army Corps of Engineers. As I mentioned, the DEIS is out for public comment right now. The BOEM will be having public hearings on the DES that the public is welcome to participate in and submit comments and speak. The first of these meetings was held actually last night. These are all virtual meetings. There are two more that are scheduled, one on December 13th and one on December 15th. And on the flyer that we'll have at the permitting station, again, there's additional information on how you can register to participate in those public meetings. Also, in addition, all federal permitting milestones and schedules can be tracked on the FAST-41 website, which is on the slide, and you can follow all the schedule for the federal permitting at that site. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. And I'm back. I just want to share a bit about some work that we've been doing around the community, and then we will break into our thoughtful discussion. So if you have those cards, I'm going to once again say if you have those cards filled out, the team is going around to collect them. We will collect them even throughout the discussion, but if we can start getting them in, I want to make sure that we get as much time to answer questions as possible. So a couple of things I want to highlight. Top of the list, we recently completed the ground penetrating radar survey, and that survey is a method to survey the existing utility lines along the cable route here in Long Beach. So to conduct that survey, it does require required some street closures, some no parking, which I know is always a challenge here in the city. But thinking ahead in preparation of that, the Equinor team worked really closely with the city, with the police department, and with the Department of Public Works here at the city to put together a strategic plan that included notices to the community and mitigation protocols with the overall goal of no car removals throughout the duration of the survey. The survey was conducted over a 2-week period. It concluded a few weeks ago, and I'm super excited to say that we did not have to remove a single car. So big thanks to everyone at the city on that coordination, and to the community for being receptive to that and to working in partnership with us throughout that survey. A few other exciting things that we've been doing around the community. We participated in the Long Beach Centennial Scavenger Hunt last spring. This year, we were a sponsor of the 24th Annual Fall Festival. Was a wonderful weekend, saw many faces, and had an opportunity to speak with so many members of the community. We also recently joined the Long Beach Latino Civic Association's 26th Annual Gala. We are proud to be sponsoring the upcoming Holiday Electric Light Parade, which is happening this weekend down in the West End. And as Harrison mentioned earlier, this evening completes a series of community presentations that we've been giving over the last few weeks. So I do want to thank everyone again for welcoming us to the community and for coming out tonight. We've very much enjoyed being part of all of the wonderful things that this community has to offer. And we look forward to continuing with that in the future. I'm going to encourage everyone, before I turn it over to our discussion, to sign up for project updates. You can do that on the Empire Wind website, and you can follow on our social channels. Outside of that, if you have a specific question or something to share, there is an information line listed on the website, and there's also an email, which does come directly to me. So if you have a question, please send it to me. That is at empirewind@equinor.com. And then finally, I look forward to seeing everyone around town throughout the festivals, throughout our local businesses here. Carrie Ann, who you met earlier, her and I are here pretty much every day during the week, working with the different community organizations, which means we also spend a lot of time having meals here. So if you see us out and about, please come over and say hello to us. All right, so now I guess it's the time that you've all been waiting for. I do thank you for your interest and patience during the presentation, but I would like to open it up for that thoughtful discussion at this point. I'm going to ask Nora, who's over here, to come up, and she will moderate the discussion, and we will also have our team. If you guys want to make your way to the stage, we're going to put the screen up, and they will be kind of in a panel seating here.
So hi, everybody. I'm Nora Madonic, and I'm going to be helping facilitate get some of your questions answered tonight. Thank you very much for using the cards. It's the best way we have found to get through a lot of questions quickly. If anyone wants another card, just put your hand up, and there are folks in the room who'd be happy to hand those off. So I'm going to read questions off, and this is our expert team, and they are going to let me know who could answer, and we'll answer as many as we can. I do want to say that what we will be doing after tonight is we'll be taking those questions that we've answered, those questions that we cannot answer, and we're going to turn them into a Q&A document, and that document will be uploaded onto the website. And we'll be sending that out. So all of the questions will be answered. I'm sorry, we're not taking questions from the floor tonight. We have a lot of questions here that I need to get through, but thank you very much. Okay, so let's get started. What is the most probable cable route as it currently stands? Who could answer that for me?
So our proposed base case is the blue line that you saw on the map earlier, and where we have it coming to shore will be on Riverside, and that will be between the super block and the foundation block. We will then go up Riverside to East Broadway, go east on East Broadway, hit Lincoln, go north on Lincoln, then go west on Harrison, back up where we will HDD underneath Reynolds Channel, plug into our substation at Pops, and then follow along the Long Island Railroad up through the Village of Island Park, and before we connect into the Barrett station. That's our proposed, so it depends on what the PSE decides that that's the best route, but that's our preferred.
So I'm going to continue down that same theme, and you may be answering this one as well, which is how and who decided on the proposed route? Is there an alternative route, and why on each?
So we do have a couple of alternative routes. There was a lot of studies and assessments that went into the proposed route, including coordination with the City of Long Beach and the Village of Island Park to make sure that we're not interfering with any kind of environmental justice communities, really working to figure out what's the best route, and not just for traffic and things, but also for the just impact to the environment as well. So we had a lot of alternatives that we started with. We slowly dwindled them down to what would be technically feasible and safe for the environment. And the other lines on the map, the yellow lines on the map, show our alternative routes that we have proposed to the PSE for evaluation as well.
Thank you. So this questioner is asking about a 60-minute show about a month ago, which I was not fortunate enough to see. But it talked about a project in England that basically, this writer is saying, ruined a fishing community. There were no more fish. There were no more jobs. There was no more discount or reduction in the cost of power. Is there any comment on that? Could I get a comment on that from Equinor? Harrison? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi there. Yeah, so I don't know which project that's referring to, and I haven't seen the what was published on that. But what I can say is Equinor does have projects that are located within fishing communities in Norfolk in England. So that's where I actually previously worked. What we found is we had a very good positive impact with our communities. We very much formed a symbiosis there. We found that actually a lot of the structures form natural reefs, which is quite attractive to certain species. We also found that through bringing more activities to areas that had actually become quite run down, where maybe other industries had left the area, bringing new industry helped revitalize. So areas such as Great Yarmouth, areas such as Lowestoft, we now see that there is much more rejuvenation of all of the businesses there, just from having more industry and more presence, more jobs, more workers, more visitors, therefore more use of local, services, restaurants, hotels. So actually what we have seen is quite a positive impact. I would still like to see what documentary is being referred to there, but our experience so far has actually been quite positive.
So we'll take a look at that. No, I'm going to keep going with this. Okay. I got that. I have your New York Times question right here. I took that from you. Thank you. Yes. So there was a New York Times article on November 26, 2022. It stated that Europe was having problems harnessing wind energy, that GE and EU countries were losing millions on wind. Would you? Okay. Okay. Let's see what we have to have for an answer. Let's just hear. Let's just hear. I asked the question, and this is why we're doing this, is try to keep, yeah. So who could answer that question? Let's just see who could answer that question for us. Harriet, could you keep going?
Yeah, I'm not really in detail on the financials of some of our suppliers. What I would say is we are hosting a supplier event. We will be hosting a series of supplier events, the first one starting next week in Albany. There will also be a couple more in the new year, more locally here. So that would actually be a very good opportunity to start talking to the suppliers and understanding more about their business models and commercials. But I'm afraid I don't know the ins and outs at the minute of the losses. I haven't read that article, I'm afraid.
So let's switch to another question, which is about, this is about.
Sorry, we wouldn't do it if we didn't make money from it. So yeah, I can't answer on GE. So that was the question. Why is GE losing money?
So let me pull us back a little bit. Let's just pull it back a little bit. So what we said before is that any question that we can't answer tonight or can't answer fully, we're going to answer, and we're going to put them into a Q&A document. So you will get your questions answered. If we haven't read the article or we don't know the background on the article, it really would be inappropriate for us to comment on it. We have to do the homework.
So you're not prepared. Was it in the New York Times?
We don't have the background on one particular article.
All of Europe, she says. And you're not
We have a lot of questions here that your neighbors are asking, and we'd really like to get to them. We will answer the question. We will answer the question. We can't answer the question right now. That hasn't been Equinor's experience. So that the question will be answered. It will be answered. Let's just move on to some of the other questions that people in the room submitted, because they want to hear the answers to their questions as well. How much are you giving to Long Beach in easement fees, utility tax, and community package? Reasonable question.
Yes, we don't have figures yet. However, we have put together a team internally that is working on putting in a holistic package together to present to the community. And that will include host community agreements, community benefits, number of jobs we're going to be providing, the taxes that we're going to be paying, the easement payments we're going to be paying. We're going to be putting a lot of money into the community. We just don't know what that looks like yet.
Could I extend that question just a little bit further to ask, when might the community learn this?
We are hoping within the next few months we will have a better understanding of what we're working with. The challenge is why we can't answer it right now is things are changing. We don't know where our route is going to be officially until the PSC gives us the Article 7 certificate. And that influences what we're going to pay, because it influences where we're going to go. So this is a long process. We have a lot of work to do ahead of us. So we can't answer that question now, but we will.
Okay. Will the wind project affect sea life, the surf, and any surrounding wildlife, birds, I don't know what this word is, but by the Rockaway flying to the beaches? What will the effect of the project be on sea life and any other wildlife?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few parts to that. So I think the best way to find that information is in our construction operations plan, which is also public and has a lot of detailed environmental surveys on all of those individual topics, right? So there's a lot of great research that comes out of Europe with fish aggregation and how fish tend to congregate around structures, especially when you introduce it to the environment. There's a lot of interesting modeling work that we've published from a lot of our subcontractors on migratory bird species and how they really do exhibit avoidance of these structures. The same can be said about marine mammals such as whales, and when construction does happen in the future, Equinor and its subcontractors employ a lot of fisheries observers and construction timeframes that they can try to avoid construction when it may most impact those things. So there's a lot of money and effort is spent trying to mitigate and reduce those risks.
Could I add just one thing to that? Yeah. In addition, the draft environmental impact statement that was just released a couple of weeks ago by BOEM also contains a fairly thorough assessment by BOEM of the impacts on all of those items that were in the question. So that would be another good place to look for some of those.
Those plans you mentioned, the construction operations plan, that's public on the BOEM website. On BOEM's website, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, it's all public there.
Is the Article 7 process on schedule? When will offshore contracts be awarded? When will landside contracts be awarded? Are these design build or design bid build contracts? I don't know if we know that yet, do we?
I can answer the first part of the question about Article 7. It is currently on schedule. We are anticipating that hopefully we can't speak for DPS, but we are anticipating that the application will be deemed complete sometime in the next month or two, and we'll be moving on to the next steps as I discussed in the presentation. So from that point of view, we are on schedule.
Could you answer, when you say that something is going to be deemed complete, what does that mean in terms of the process?
Sure. So under the Article 7 regulations, they have a list of requirements that are needed to go into a project application before they say that that application is complete and the next steps in the analysis of the project and the impacts from the project are undertaken. So the first thing after you submit your application is DPS staff reviews it, comes up with any additional questions or identifies whether or not there's something else that they would like to see in terms of an answer or information in order to satisfy the requirements of the Article 7 regulations. Once they have identified that that Empire Wind has provided all that information, then they say the application is complete. And the next step is they do have the public statement hearings, procedural conference, and again, that's when the additional analysis of the project to decide ultimately what would be approved or not approved and what conditions that must be followed with ultimately the certificate that would be received.
Thank you. So the other half of this question, I don't want to lose that, and this would have to come from someone from Equinor, I think, is when will the offshore contracts and landside contracts be awarded, and has it been determined whether these are going to be design build or design bid build contracts?
The best answer I can give to that is that the contract negotiations, some of them are in place, some are ongoing. With respect to the nature of the contracts themselves, I cannot comment on that. Not my field of expertise, but I would note that, you know, there are different types of contracts for different phases of the project for different aspects.
Will some of those contracts, will the contracts be announced when they are awarded?
I'd have to check, but my understanding is they generally are.
Okay, yes?
Yeah, just to add to that. So we have issued some fairly significant contracts already, and they were announced publicly. We are in the process of negotiating others. There will be some that will still come later, depending on the permitting processes, depending on, again, when we get finalization of what routes are preferred. So there's ongoing work for various different contract types and sizes. There are some offshore that have already been awarded, and onshore we are in the process of working on, and then more to come. They will all be announced publicly.
Thank you. How far is Beacon Wind 1 from the shore?
So Beacon Wind, and I have a colleague if he wants to add to this if you like. It's 60 miles east of Montauk and 20 miles south of Nantucket.
So hang on to that mic. How far is Empire Wind 1 from Riverside Boulevard?
So if you recall the map, you have it's kind of a pizza slice shape. So at the closest point, it's 15 miles from Long Beach. And as it widens, it goes to 30 miles off the coast.
What is the height of the base? I assume we're talking about the turbines. What is the height of the base and what is the length of the blades?
It's 951 feet tall at the tallest point where the blade reaches the top. I don't know the width of the blades. Is it 200 something meters?
The total swept area of the blades is 236 meters. Not sure what that is in feet, but the blades themselves are then just over 100 meters each. Does someone want to give me a conversion?
300 feet.
300
100
feet.
meters, 300 feet.
Thank you.
Approximately.
300 feet.
So, so this goes back to the question of mammals. And this is quoting a story in 10 days ago, phys.phys.org published a story regarding a study published in the Journal of Communications, Earth and Environment on how large-scale wind farms like this one can, quote, strongly impact marine primary production as well as oxygen levels. What studies have been done to review the impact of this wind farm on the now Recovery Office ecosystem, marine mammals, fishery, etc.?
I can take that. We got a very similar question last week at Island Park, and we didn't have the answer last week, but we read that article. So that was an article that was specific to a wind farm in, I believe, the southern area of the North Sea. So it's a bit of a complicated question. I think ultimately the results of that study are not currently included in the federal permitting process here in the United States. It's kind of a tough comparison to compare the results of that study to such a specific area to where Empire Wind 1 and 2 will be. But whoever had that question, I think a few of us would love to chat more about that when we move outside to the posters, because it certainly was interesting, and would be also a great topic to put to BOEM in the draft environmental impact statement process. I think it might be a bit easier to talk together in person, but it's an effort to model how wind farms interact with the atmosphere and how that may influence mixing locally in the wind farm. So not locally at Long Island, Long Beach, but locally in the lease area. And it was, I don't think it necessarily was as drastic as completely reducing oxygen levels, and I think it's more focused on how they could predict primary production changes in the lease area. So certainly an interesting topic, and I think, again, it's a really great thing that specifically to pose to BOEM in the public comment period, because it's not currently included in the process yet.
So I'm going to skip 2 cards because they are. Oh, I'm sorry.
If I could just make one more point about that article. It's not my scientific specialty, but it's my understanding that the calculations and the results were computer modeled and not based on actual measurements that were taken in the wind farm. So that's something else that we need to consider in looking at the results.
So I want to keep going. I have 2 questions here that repeat questions that we've already answered, so I'm going to move those off the list. How many turbines produce 9 gigawatts?
Hi there. Yeah, it's a question of just a little bit of maths here. So our turbines are each going to produce 15 megawatts. So if we were to produce 9 megawatts, then you just multiply up to see how many turbines you'd need to get to that number. But yeah, ours are 15 megawatts each.
And continuing this questioner, when will the environmental impact studies be completed? And if they are completed, when they're completed, can we see the data?
If you're referring to the environmental impact statement, the draft environmental impact statement was issued in November 18th by BOEM, and they're expecting and that's available for public review right now on the BOEM website. The final environmental impact statement they're hoping to have that issued by the end of 2023. and the record of decision would come shortly thereafter.
And so will the data be available for people to look at?
The agency makes the data available along the lines of their regulations. It's somewhat out of our hands, but to the extent that the data is publicly available, BOEM will make it so. And some data is actually protected because it reflects sensitive information such as archaeological data and other matters. So there are some forms of data that goes into the studies that does not get produced, but there are others that are available. Again, the best resource for all of you to get your hands around environmental studies, I encourage you to go onto the BOEM website, look at the draft environmental impact statement, and please provide comments. Thank you.
The Article 7 application also contains a lot of information on environmental impacts related specifically to state lands, state waters. So that's another source, and that is publicly available as well on DPS's DMM website.
So can you tell us how the turbines will be maintained and monitored? Who will own them?
Yeah, so Equinor will have teams of people in New York, and this is part of our workforce development, is to actually start to employ the people that are going to be doing the long-term operation and maintenance of these turbines. So these are unmanned assets. They're very heavily instrumented. So there's a lot of data that will be coming to shore. So we'll actually control them from a control room based at South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. And that's also where we will have our operation and maintenance hub. So that's where we will deploy technicians offshore. And we will also have all of the assets onshore that we've been talking through already tonight with the substations. So all of that will be managed from our O&M base in South Brooklyn. And that's where we're hoping to also see a lot more engagement with the community here for maintenance of the assets that you'll see in these communities.
Thank you.
If I could just add a point to that. I work with fishermen who are concerned about safety in the area. And one of the big advantages that I see is that we also station a service operations vehicle that's about 250 feet long with people living on board for 2-week shifts, including an EMT and people trained in emergency response. And one of those SOVs off of England, for example, rescued the crew of a fishing boat that was going down there about a year ago. You can find that article online. So the part of the maintenance crew actually lives on a boat that's stationed in the wind farm 24/7.
How is the cable placed under the seabed? Is it trenched? Is it tunneled? Something else?
Yeah. Question about trenching the cable. That's done, generally speaking, as the cable is installed by a specialized vessel. And the plan is to bury it into the seabed down 4 to 6 feet and to bury it much deeper in areas where there might be anchors. It's something on which we spend a lot of time getting detailed information about the seabed. And we also have experience from about 10 active telecom cables that go out of New Jersey and another 10 that go out of Long Island. And the burial record on those for the last 20 years or so has been about 6 feet into the seabed for most of them. And that has enabled them to achieve a very low rate of interaction with fishing gear and anchors.
I don't know the answer to this, so I'm just going to ask it. Does anyone know where the Ambrose Light Tower and Light Ship are? And I think that that's the precursor to my next question, which is how much money will you be fined if you have an oil spill?
Yeah, I can. The Clean Water Act provides statutory penalties for violative releases of contaminants, including oil. The penalty that would be associated with a spill of that nature is far too speculative for us to comment on. But you can look that up, and that's in the law. You can see how much is usually available to the agency for application of a penalty and how that works. Thank you.
No.
Those towers are gone, and they were the single target for any vessel coming in from ocean to enter New York Harbor. And they were struck. Well, the Ambrose lightship is sitting at the bottom of the Ambrose Channel because it was hit and sank. And in 2007, the Ambrose Light Tower was hit finally, after being hit so many times by an oil tanker, that the Coast Guard cut it down and got rid of it. This is the one thing that any ship is looking for when it comes to New York. And it gets hit. We're going to put how many towers offshore?
So I think if I may, because I want to make sure these questions get answered, how will shipping be protected around the wind farm?
Okay. There have been extensive studies both in the USA and a gentleman mentioned in Europe. There's a navigation safety risk assessment that's gone through all the math and predicted the possible rates of accident, which are very low here. Coming to this from the perspective of a more practical mariner, one of the things that I remember is that this company, Equinor, is a Norwegian-based company. It's a mariner's company. It's a fishing company. And they have been building stuff in the North Sea and the rest of the North Atlantic for more than 40 years. So they build things to last in the North Atlantic environment. And around coastal Europe, there are about 5,000 or more offshore wind turbines that are operating there. That area is also extremely heavily trafficked by large ship traffic. So it's not as if this is their first rodeo.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, we are currently working very closely with the U.S. Coast Guard. So we have regular calls with them specifically to discuss navigation, not just in terms of avoiding collisions, but also aiding mariners when it comes to navigation. So that is concerned with all the marking, all of the lighting, any kind of fog protections. So that's something we are working very, very closely currently with the Coast Guard in that design. And I would say the layouts are also have been reviewed with the shipping lanes in mind as well to make sure we reduce collision risk as much as possible.
I think that for folks in the United States, it's going to be important to answer that question specific to here, since offshore wind is relatively new for us, right? So I'm going to go to one more question, and as I said, we're going to answer the rest of these and the ones that we've answered already, and we'll do them in writing, and we will publish a Q&A. After this question, we will close this part of the meeting and go out to the, well, we have open house in here, we have open house out there, and if you would like to talk with any of these subject matter experts, they will be there for further conversation. So we're going to end with the first question that was handed to me, because I don't want to miss that. How was BP selected to partner on the project? BP perpetrated the worst oil spill in U.S. history. Why wasn't a U.S. oil company with a better environmental record selected? Tough question. I'm wondering, Tom Cunningham from Equinor. Tom?
Thanks. My name is Tom Cunningham. I'm the stakeholder manager for the Beacon Wind Project, so Harrison's twin brother. That's a good question. I saw it earlier, which is why I was thinking about it. First of all, it's a very fair question. The answer that I can offer is BP bought into Equinor as a 50-50 partner in 2021, and they paid I'm very sorry. So BP bought in to be a joint venture partner at 50%, and they paid $1.1 billion to do that. That just shows, I think, the valuation that they see in offshore wind. But to your specific question about why they were selected, one is important to know that yes, that accident happened and it's devastating, and I think reputationally that's a big thing to unpack. I won't speak to that, but I will say that BP has super ambitious net zero targets, as does Equinor, and they have a goal of, it's a good ambition. We will hold them to it, but it's they have a strong ambition of I think 50 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2050. But the bottom line is Equinor is the operator and for the development, construction, and operations of the project, so we're fully there. What BP brings to the project is technical expertise and financial resources to make the projects happen. That's enough. That's the answer I would offer. One point about the New York Times article about what's going on with the European turbine manufacturers. I read the article. It's a very good question. I think the answers are actually in the article, but what I would offer is that there are three major factors at play. Again, these are the turbine manufacturers, so it's like the engine manufacturer for the auto industry. It's not the auto industry itself, right? But three things. One, huge supply chain challenges to build so many of them so quickly. Two, a lot of challenges with how the permits in Europe are granted, meaning the projects are slowed down in terms of how quickly they're being built, which kind of messes up your ability to get paid for what you said you would build and install. And I think the third issue, talking to a colleague who does supply chain work, is that because offshore wind is attractive, say compared to onshore wind, because you can go so much bigger, the power you generate is exponential, is a curve as opposed to linear for the bigger your tower gets. So there's so much pressure to build bigger and bigger ones, they don't get economies of scale or reward for the ones they're building. For example, the 15 megawatt ones that Equinor will be building for this project, for the next project, like Beacon, they're trying to find bigger ones. But the bottom line is these developers have a really hard time achieving economies of scale on top of supply chain crunch and on top of the regulatory challenges that make it hard to deliver them on time. I hope you don't mind. I don't take a follow-up because I know you're running out of schedule.
Right. So you can certainly ask your follow-up in the open house, and that's fine. Just find Tom. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you for your questions, and we will see you at the next public engagement meeting, and we'll be answering more then. Thank you.